Hi there everyone, Lars back at long last with another video for Frieren Beyond Journey's End, brought to you by Camille's Harem, not just a podcast by novice writers for novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And in today's video, I want to talk about naming your characters, and what we can learn from the fantastic yet somewhat odd and sometimes awkward naming scheme for Frieren and all the characters in this fantastic anime. And let me just say right up front, naming characters is one of the hardest things that you will end up doing. And that's because if you're going to be with them all this time, you want a name that's going to stick, a name that's going to capture who they are, that people are going to remember, it's going to resonate with them whenever someone says the name of your character, it will be their face, the description of them, their many deeds will pop first and foremost into their minds. That's what you want. And so you gotta get the right name, don't you? What if the name sucks? Oh no. And sometimes you're writing a story and then you realize, I really hate this character's name. Why did I choose it? Gah! And you might end up like me, where you have this amazing story idea, and for 2 years you have no idea what you're actually going to name any of your characters. So you just call them based off of their designation within the story, like whatever their role is or whatever their profession happens to be, like kind of like Goblin Slayer. But really, you want to have proper names for your characters, and this is where Frieren Beyond Journey's End does things really interestingly, because all of the characters have German words for names, not German names, German words. And at first, I was just ready to kind of roll my eyes and be like, oh my gosh, again, another anime where German sounds really cool, we should use that for the language and for the names. And I mean, as someone who speaks German, as someone who is half German, hey, I love German, but if you're going to use German names and German schemes and German whatever, maybe put a little bit more of effort into it. Why just use these random verbs and nouns for the names of your characters? Well, this is where Beyond Journey's End really puts in the work, because a lot of the names that are chosen for these characters, whether they be simple nouns or verbs, end up being very important to that character. Not just, hey, this is my name and I love it, but rather that the name says something about these characters. What we mostly see in Beyond Journey's End is that the characters both embody and contradict the name that they have. Now, this doesn't go, though, for every character. So, like, for instance, when you're looking at Kana and Land, honestly, a character's name is Entry, the other character whose name is Land. How do they embody these names? How do they contradict these names? Sometimes these characters just happen to have interesting sounding names to the mangaka, and ultimately they don't really mean much beyond that. But for the characters where we can perceive, where they do both, again, embody and contradict their names, this is where we can have a whole lot of fun. So, of course, let's start off with our heroine, Frieren, whose name in German means to freeze. And it works for her because she is a cold character at first. She seems very aloof, cold-hearted, and just blows on through wherever she's going, either as a breeze or leaving a wake of destruction when it comes to demons. However, Frieren, as we come to learn throughout the entirety of the story, has a heart of gold. Because of her interactions with Himmel the hero and with Heite and Eisen, she begins to form real connections with other people. When she realizes, holy cow, I lost time with these friends of mine. I left to go on my journey and collect magic. I come back and Himmel's an old man and he passes away shortly afterwards. Heite manages to live a little bit longer than him, but also Heite kicks the bucket. Eisen is now growing old and can't accompany me on journeys anymore. Frieren has to learn. And as I talked about in my previous video about Beyond Journey's End, Frieren goes on this amazing journey of learning about why the past matters, why every day, every year matters, how that matters in the present, but also how to reach for the future. To be this character who can have her feet planted firmly in 3 different places and come to appreciate her time with Himmel and the others, despite it being so short in the massive lifespan that she has, and to enjoy every moment that she has right now, and to push forward to hopefully a much brighter, better future. And we especially get more of that in the later episodes of this first season. So Frieren is a character who, despite her name meaning to freeze, learns to have a golden and warm heart. And we see so much good coming from Frieren that she kind of contradicts the implication of her name as being this cold, careless individual. She is still, at first glance, the way she acts, she seems kind of cold and aloof, but when you get to know her, you begin to realize just how warm and amazing she is as a person. And I especially love how you get to see that in her relationship with Sein. How Sein's like, oh, you cold, uncaring elf, but as he journeys with her, he comes to realize just how in tune she is with the others, how aware she is of when she makes mistakes, and how caring and loving she is. Again, this beautiful contradiction to what her name implies. Then we have the character of Fern, and I will admit I completely missed this in my last video by just calling her Fern. Her name is not Fern, her name is Fern. Fern in German means far. And normally you would use the word Fern in Fernsehen, television, when you're watching something from far away, or you must go far. Ich muss fern gehen. So, Fern, how does she live up to her name? Kind of like with Frieren, cold and aloof. However, with Fern, she has like this 1,000-yard stare always going on. You're not sure if she's present, you're not sure where she's at, mentally, personally, emotionally. She seems incapable of connecting with other people at times, and that really fits what we see of her constantly. And yet, what we learn about Fern is how Fern is so close to the people she loves. She's so close to Frieren that she understands her master really well, that she can see what other people can't. For instance, how her magical aura does fluctuate just a little, despite how much training she has undergone to always control her magical output. And she can understand the whims and the wiles and the ways of her master. And while she has a hard time understanding some of the boyish ways of Stark, she is coming to understand him as well. The people that she loves, she truly loves and holds close and dear. When her Mage's staff is destroyed during the second trial to become a first-class mage, she is utterly devastated because that staff represents her connection to Haita. He's dead, he's long gone, and so she keeps that close to her as a memory of who she is, of where she comes from, and why she is a mage. That she is a mage to live up to his expectations and to repay him for all the kindness that he gave to her. So even though Fern, her name means far, and she seems very distant most of the time, Fern proves herself to probably be one of the closest characters to everyone throughout the series. We then have Stark, and I will tell you right off the bat, I am finding it really hard to say Stark and not Stark, because I learned my German in Bavaria, and all the STs become Stas. But in proper Hochdeutsch, you would be pronouncing it as Stark. Stark means strong, and I think most people already knew that, and of course he lives up to it. This guy is so incredibly strong that even Eisen was scared of him, and we've seen how Eisen just doesn't care. This guy will throw himself headfirst off of a cliff just because. It's what he does. He was scared of Stark because Stark is just that powerful, and we see that confirmed in how he can take on a dragon single-handedly. This guy created a gorge just by practicing his axe swings. This guy can take on demons despite not having any magic, and can easily hold his own in a fight. Stark is an incredibly strong, powerful guy. However, when it comes to what he's not strong to, he is a wimp in so many ways, and this is what contradicts his name. How often does he just kind of wimp out? It's too cold, too hot, though they haven't really run into many problems in the north where it's too hot. Normally it's too cold. I don't wanna. I am scared of Fern. I'm scared of Frieren. I'm scared of doing something that's going to be embarrassing. So despite all of his strength, he's a bit of a coward, and that's something that he has to constantly work on, of being self-assertive, of getting to understand other people, and being willing to engage in a fight or in a trial, in a challenge, without other people dragging him along for the ride. And now here we come to the character that actually inspired this idea for a video, Sein. Oh boy. This was an interesting one to research, to really look deeper into his character. Now then, in German, Sein can have two different meanings. It can be the possessive for him, so it would be his. However, Sein can also be the verb to be. Sein is one of the most interesting, one of the most notorious words for any foreign speaker to come across, because Sein, when it's used as a verb, will almost never be Sein ever again. It is always conjugated into something else. Ich bin, du bist, ist, sie ist, ihr seid, wir sind, sie sind. And then once you start going into other, whether it becomes past, future, present, potential, Sein will always change. War, wäre, würden. It is so crazy. So, when we talk about Sein, Sein is interesting, especially not just as a word, but as a character, because when Frieren, Stark, and Fern find Sein, he's just hanging out the village doing nothing. He's just dreaming and hoping that one day his friend will show up, but this guy has no aspirations in life. This guy's one of the strongest magic users. This guy could be an absolute powerhouse of a priest if only he applied himself a little bit more, but he doesn't. It's the same thing with the verb Sein. Sein is one of the most useful verbs, if not the most useful verb, in the entire German language. But it can't do anything on its own. It needs other people to inspire it to become something else, and it then adheres to that situation. When we look at Sein the character, that is exactly who he is. Without other people there to inspire him or to move him on, he's just there. He's not doing anything. But thanks to his interactions with Frieren, Fern, and Stark, we see other layers to Sein. Sein is able to completely change himself based on whatever situation is needed, whether he can be the kind counselor, the lecherous priest, the badass warrior, the ultimate healer. Sein can be anything that the party needs him to be based on the situation. And that is so cool. In a way, Sein is actually the one character who truly lives up to his name other than Himmel, Heiter, and Eisen. They definitely live up to their names. There's almost no contradiction to them whatsoever. It's the same with Sein. Sein is just someone who needs truly an inspiration, and he needs friends in order to get him off his duff and finally start becoming the hero that he was always needed to be. Otherwise, he's just like the verb Sein, hanging out there, really interesting, tons of potential, but it can't do anything on its own. And you know what? Maybe that's actually where the contradiction comes in, because Sein does strike out finally for himself to become the priest, the powerful priest who will hang out with his friend Monkey and help save the world. And maybe that right there, that is the contradiction, because again, Sein can't do anything on its own, but the character Sein finally is able to make that choice and strike out on his own and be the hero he was always meant to be. As we come to the first class mage exams, this is where we get to meet a whole lot of other interesting characters. Some whose names really don't mean all that much. I've already brought up Land, Kana, there's Methode. Methode kind of lives up to her name. She's fits in with her personality. She's methodical, method, but really there's not much more depth than that. However, when we look at a character, for instance, like Lawine, whose name means avalanche in German, definitely lives up to that, where she's calm, cool, and collected in one moment and instantly snaps and gets aggressive and violent in the next, just like how anyone in the Alps will realize an avalanche can come at any moment. It just takes a snap of the finger and and devastation starts coming. She lives up to that, but then again, where's the contradiction? An avalanche is uncaring, it's an unstoppable force of nature that's going to plow people over, but Lavina does care for others. She especially cares for Kana and puts Kana's needs before her own. She is caring, she's kind, despite the way that she's able to snap and become absolutely brutal at times. That right there is the contradiction to her name's sake. And then there's Denken. This is a guy, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Denken, to think. This guy is incredibly intelligent and is super logical. However, his motivations for becoming a first-class mage and for doing anything that he does is because he just wants to go back home to visit his wife's grave. He's sentimental. Everything that he's doing is because of sentimentality. Just thinking, just logically speaking, he has no reason to become a first-class mage. He has no reason to be here. He can be off amassing even more power and wealth and playing all kinds of political games down south. But he wants to return home. He wants to go to his wife's grave. And that right there is the contradiction to his name. And then we have Verbal. Oh, I love Verbal. His name means whirl, and it fits him entirely well. He throws everyone off balance when they meet him. Even Ubel is completely thrown off balance. Like, who is this guy? What is he doing? He is a whirlwind of passion, of force, of personality, and it's very hard to get along with him at first. However, as Ubel finds out in fighting Verbal, that Verbal is grounded in a set of values. How despite the fact that he is a killer, this guy will murder people if it is required. He will do everything in his power to stop the killing before he has to shed blood. And that is shown in his trademark spell, which binds people in place so that way he doesn't have to get violence. So again, Verbal, this tour de force of power, magic, personality, is very grounded in his values. He's someone who doesn't want to necessarily fight, even though he's always actionable. He's like, you would work well in the fight. I want you for some action. Oh, this will be great. Because ultimately, at the heart of it all, he wants peace. And the spell that he uses stops things from moving. It is a contradiction to his name. And because I've brought up Ubel, let's talk about her. Ubel, her name means evil. And yeah, I know that other people can say böse will mean the same thing. Depending on your context right here, böse could actually mean like a lesser form of wickedness and of evil. Ubel is truly, that's terrifying. And that's something that you actually learn when you're speaking German after a while, is that the Germans will have kind of levels of severity for certain actions or for certain words. Böse, das ist ein böses Kind. That's a bad child right there. But if you say, das ist ein übles Kind, that's an evil child. Put a stake through that kid's heart and put him in the ground. The interesting thing with Ubel is how she does live up to her name. She is off her rocker. She is crazy. She's a psychopath. She will kill you, as we see in the series. And she has no qualms about that whatsoever. She even goes out and seeks fights so that way she can kill other people. She's kind of messed up. But at the same time, her powers are empathetic. She's only able to steal other people's magic, which is something she's very good at, if she's able to empathize with them. And through that empathy, she's able to form a relationship with Land. Now then, because I haven't read ahead in the manga, I have no idea if she intends on cutting off his head later on, but it's interesting, it's a contradiction that her powers, her best powers, rely on her ability to empathize with others, something that is not often associated with evil. And thanks to that power of empathy and that need for empathy, Ubel has to work with other people, which subsides in many instances her more vicious and wicked tendencies. And that's really fascinating to see right there, because it doesn't remove who she is. In many ways, she is wicked at heart, or at least messed up in the head, but her powers put her into a situation where she has to work with other people, where she has to get along, and where those more violent tendencies take a back seat. Now, where some of the names get really interesting right here is when we talk about Flamme and Serie. So, Flamme, who is Frieren's teacher, at first I did not like her name. I'm like, oh, come on. Why did you just name the character Flame? Oh, boy. By the end of the season, I've really come to appreciate why her name is Flamme. So, Flame. She is this bright light, this guiding light, as it were, in Frieren's life. She is the warmth to Frieren's early coldness. She is the one who helps begin to warm Frieren's heart. But also, a flame. A flame is what gave potential and possibility to humanity. By being able to harness fire, humans changed. Probably more so than with any other invention. Because humanity can live without the wheel. The Native Americans proved that by building amazing cities that did not require wheels. But flame. Humans need fire. Humans need warmth. Humans need to cook their food in order to really gain a healthier diet and expand their possibility and live longer. Fire does so much for humanity. And as we learn from Serie is that Flamme brought magic to humanity, giving humanity a chance to fight back against the demons. Flamme changed everything for this world. Like the invention or the discovery of fire and how fire could be used by humans, Flamme's experiments with magic and bringing magic to the rest of humanity changed everything. And I really do love that. And the sad things, though, is that a flame will eventually flicker out and die. And that's the sad thing about Flamme, is that this character who's just so incredible, so influential, so caring, so transformative. Her lifespan was a blink of an eye within the history of the world. She's remembered, but other than by Frieren and Serie, maybe from some other elven characters, she is essentially forgotten. And that's sad and beautiful right there. Maybe I should put Flamme right up there with all of the with the characters such as Himmel, Eisenheiter, who truly do live up to their names, because it's hard to see where the contradiction quite is there. But maybe we'll learn a little bit more about her as we move along. Maybe I could stock up that one of the contradictions to the name Flamme is how she loves flowers. Fire must consume everything in order to survive, but for Flamme, what she cared most about was ensuring the continuation of life for all the people around her, and that the world would flourish long after she was gone. Finally, we come to Flamme's instructor, or teacher, or master, Serie. And this is an interesting name to deal with right here, because her name means series. It's not serious, it's series, as in like a series of books, a series on television. And I was wondering, okay, what are we dealing with her name? I think ultimately Serie is more of a contradiction to her name as opposed to someone like Flamme who really embodies it. And the reason why I say that is because when we learn more about what Serie wants, what motivates her, she loves the endless battle with the demons. She wants it to go on forever. The reason for that is because that will allow her to continue pushing the boundaries of magic. It will encourage her to constantly research, to delve in deeper, to take on students, apprentices, whom she can craft into these masterful warriors. She's an elf with almost a limitless life, and she loves what she does, and she wants it to go on for as long as she lives. And so when Flamme begins to introduce magic to the rest of the world, wants there to be a strong magical academy that unites the entire world to train a new generation of mages, especially of human mages, Serie is like, I don't want any of that. I don't want any change. Because this, my life as I have it right now, this is perfect for me. And so we see that at the end where she is trying to challenge that change. And yet, over the centuries, she has warmed up to it because, now she is the Grand Master who oversees the promotion of mages to first-class mages. She's the one who gets the final say in it if she is the proctor for the exams, which she is at the end of the season. And so there's a little bit of a contradiction there in her name, is that she does not want things to continue on. That's her personality, but we see it as where she's like, fine, if things are going to change, I might as well be in control of that change. Everything that continues after me will be because of me and my word, shaped in my image, to live up to my ideals of magic. And there you have it. That's Serie right there. So when I look at these characters, and granted there's way more characters that we could dive on into, but I am not going to be like some people and go through every single character and what their name means when you translate it on over to English. I think that the greatest worth in understanding the names of these characters is when we can see again how they live up to those names and how they contradict them. So again, Frieren, to freeze. She has a freezing personality at first, but then she comes to have just the biggest and glowiest and warmest gushy heart for a silly little elf who is out there. Fern, whose name means far. She seems like she's got the 1,000-yard stare. It seems like she's totally distant, but she holds everyone who she loves so close to her. She is one of the most loving characters in the entire series. We then have Stock, who is strong. He is incredibly powerful and all that, but he's a bit of a wimp in so many cases, and it requires his friends to kind of bring him along, and he has to learn how to overcome that inherent weakness and that self-doubt that he's carrying on his shoulders. You have Sein, to be, who is a character who, until he was finally given that courage and motivation by Frieren, could never be who he needed to be. And yet, this is the guy who has the potential, has the power to be everything that the world needs him to be. Just as the verb sein is the perfect verb for almost any use in German. You then have Lavina. You have the avalanche. She definitely lives up to it when she gets angry, but she's so kind and caring towards someone like Kana. You then have Denken, to think. He's all about the logic, about the strategy, thinking of the long game, and yet all of it is motivated by sentimentality and love. You have Verbal, who just throws everyone off balance. He is an absolute force, a whirlwind to the world around him, and yet he is grounded by solid values. And that is actually what, again, empowers his signature spell. You have Ubel, who is in many ways an evil individual, and yet her best powers, require her to be empathetic. And that empathy, as we've seen, allows her to work with other people, and there's a good chance that she's been developing a good friendship with Land. We'll have to see how it goes from here. You then have Flamme, the fire, who lives up to that. She is the bright fire who changed the world, but winked out, maybe a little bit too soon as far as Frieren and Serie are concerned. However, she is a fire who loved the world and did not seek to consume it. You then have Serie, who, despite her name being series, which you would think it would be the continuation, she wants things to remain stagnant. And if they can't be stagnant, she will control that change. And yet characters like Fern and Frieren, they push against her power and her control, proving that she cannot keep the world stagnant, stuck in this immortal war between mages and demons. What I like here is that all of the names to these characters help to give you an idea of their character arcs, where they stand within the story, what kind of roles do they play in the overall plot. This is really smart, and this is something that the Japanese actually do quite often. The names of their characters are usually designed to encapsulate their personalities or what role they'll play in the overall story. And it's actually not just something that the Japanese themselves do. This is something that you will find a whole lot in ancient mythology, especially Greek and Roman mythology. The names of the characters will capture an element of who that character is to signify to the listeners or to the readers who these individuals are and what kinds of adventures they might be expected to go on. Now then, when you're writing your own stories, you can do this for yourself. You can have fun selecting names that are contradictory, names that might not exactly fit, or names that perfectly fit your characters. For instance, one of my favorite characters to write, Bob the Virus, I chose the name because for such a vicious, violent, over-the-top character, a name like Bob just doesn't seem right. I mean, Bob? Really? Just seems like such a silly, bland name. And so you have this silly, bland name for such an over the top, overpowering, overwhelming character, and I like the contradiction in that. But for all the other characters within the Legend of the Ten Lords series, their names don't really mean anything to their characters. They're just names I felt worked well with that character. So when it comes to naming your characters, and sadly I can't say that there's any one right way to do it. It depends on the story that you're telling. And especially if you're writing fantasy or science fiction, you're coming up with your own unique names. Yeah, you might just throw random syllables together and say, ooh, that just rolls off the tongue so well. However, what I will say is this, is that if you're coming up with your own names and you're like, oh, well, what should I do? I would say this, you don't have to go the route of J.R.R. Tolkien and create an entirely new language to justify the name that you just gave to your characters, but instead you can think about, okay, culturally speaking, linguistically speaking, for this other world or for this magical race, what might this name mean? Oh, this name means falling rain. Well, why would they name a character Falling Rain? Oh, because she was born on a day when it was raining. Okay, well, that's nice. Or maybe, no, Falling Rain is actually kind of embodies her personality, where she comes on really hard. Who knows? I'm just firing off right here. Or maybe she's as soft as falling rain. Or maybe, just like with the rain, you get drop after drop after drop until you get completely covered, you're completely wet, and then you can fully understand falling rain. She only reveals just pieces of her drop by drop, facets of her personality, until finally you are completely inundated with her and you understand who she is. That's where you can have some fun with those names. And what could it be in your fantasy language? It could be Zdurkadurk. So yeah, naming characters is kind of hard, but thinking about the meaning to the names that you use, or why you want to use a certain name or a certain word for a name, can be very helpful in being able to capture who this character is and what role they play within the plot. And one of the things that I just really do enjoy about Frieren Beyond Journey's End is how the names of all these different characters encapsulate who they are, contradict who they are, and help to detail what role they will play in the overall plot. So there you have it, a breakdown of some of the iconic names from the series thus far, why those names are so important, and what we as writers can learn from doing a deeper analysis of the naming scheme within Frieren Beyond Journey's End. The next video that I will do on this series is whether or not Frieren is truly a modern classic. Oh boy, that's going to be a fun one. That's not going to make anyone upset with me. So if you're interested in that particular discussion, make sure that you have subscribed and that you've clicked the bell notification so that way you will be notified for when that video eventually comes out. But in the meantime, if you'd like to support the work that we do here at Camille's Harem, then please check out our other videos, or you can check out the books that we have published. Links for them are in the description below. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.